Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Hi.
So
Hello.
we're going to hit the ground running here. So if people join late, I'm sorry. I warned you all to be on time. So first of all, I want to say thank you to these two ladies for being here this evening. This is actually a very, very important thing that they're doing, and I'm really looking forward to them. Letting all you guys know what they've got, coming and how it's going, and what they're really kind of fighting for. So, having said that, tonight we have Dr. Annalise
Anaïs.
Anais. See, I knew I'd mess it up.
I told you I'd
Hey,
call you out.
yep. Dr. Anaïs Webster Mennuti and Kimberly Kessler.
Hi.
See, your name was easier, but
I know, right?
right.
Sure.
So what I'm going to do is this is really much, if I have questions or whatnot, I'll pop in, or if we get questions from the chat, I'll pop in. But I want you ladies to tell
Yeah.
us what you were doing and why it is so important. So whichever one of you want to go first, and if anybody's watching and there's an audio issue, if you can't hear somebody, let me know in the chat. So having said that, ladies, it's all yours.
Cool. Yeah, I can start off. My name's Anaïs, and I am a pharmacist, and that's kind of how I'm related to this issue. So a little bit of my pharmacy background. I was a technician during pharmacy school, and I stayed on as an intern during my schooling, and then I was at a chain pharmacy, and then when I graduated, I switched chains to a different one and worked as a pharmacist there. And when I got kind of like 3 years into that as a full-time pharmacist over in a retail chain, and then I switched over to hospital pharmacy, which is pretty different than your general retail, what you think of as like the general public thinks of as pharmacy. So I'm working in this hospital, but then I stayed on at the chain where I was working because I liked who I worked with. I liked the relationships I'd formed with some of my regulars, and it was just working on my days off from the hospital like a lot less. I didn't notice a lot of the problems that were going on in retail. They didn't bother me as much until COVID. And so then COVID happened, and that's when I was like, okay, this is actually tipping the balance for me. Even though the chain where I worked was it was a little bit better than some of the other ones. Um but I was like, okay, this is getting to the point where the vaccine load is too high and all the shots, and the stores where I worked didn't even do testing yet. And there it just got to be too much, and I was like, this is unsafe. I don't want to continue to be a part of an unsafe system in general. So it wasn't even necessarily like the one store, the one chain. It was just like the system in general needs to change, and I really just needed to kind of vote with my feet and leave that
Mhm.
company. And so how I know Kim and how Kim is involved outside of pharmacy, I'm actually a writer, storyteller. So Kim edited my first novel, and that's how we know each other, and we really like to work together. And so we were working on a project, and we were talking about pharmacy, and I was telling her all the issues that were going on, and I was actually sending her tweets. So I would text her tweets like every day about pharmacy problems. Like, it's not just me. Look at this tweet. Look at this tweet. And then one day we were talking, and I was like, oh, yeah, there's a tech who works at the hospital where I work. She came over from one of the retail chains, and their store is 3,000 prescriptions behind. Like, 3,000 needed to be filled. And she was like, wait, what? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's like their store ordinarily would do like maybe 500 a day. And so they are days and days, like almost a week or more behind. And there's just no way to catch up, really. It was just like they're just drowning and they're trying to figure it out. And then I was like, no one in the general public knows about this in a way that they should. And I was like, someone should do a documentary, or I want to do a documentary about this something. And Kim immediately latched on to the part where she said, she looked at my text and she's like, oh, you said you want to do a documentary. We're doing this documentary. I have friends who can help. So it definitely quickly
Mhm.
turned into like from someone to we're going to do it. And that's
Mhm.
how this whole project got started. So I'll let Kim introduce herself, and then she can introduce Ethan, our third partner, as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So my name's Kim, and I am an editor, a developmental editor. So I develop stories with amazing writers like Anaïs, and I develop them for books or film or whatever. Um, so storytelling and story structure are my jam. And so working with Anaïs, it was, I didn't know pharmacy Twitter was a thing, so that was new.
Mhm.
And I didn't know anything about pharmacy. I'm just, I get my anti anxiety meds and my Adderall, and I'm good to go. I drive through, and that's what I do. And so I didn't know anything. And so as a storyteller and as a nerdy learner, I'm just asking all these questions. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, so 3,000, how many, like, I have no context for what that even means. Like, how many days is that? Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you do? Like, when you get a script in, like, what are all the steps you got to take before you and so, like, I'm just like eating up all this information, and I'm like, okay, as a general, like, layman who just uses a pharmacy, I have no idea what's going on behind the
Mhm.
counter. And so it was just like I could see the merit, right? And like, cool, general audience does not know this, so we're coming in, you know you get the Karens right in line, and they want their stuff and they want it now, and they don't understand why they can't
Mhm.
get it, and because they don't understand what's going on, like, they don't know what else is happening. And everybody's just coming with their own lens, and it's human, right? It's so human, especially in a squeeze like COVID, where people are we're just done, right? Like, we're just done. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it's just super compelling from a storytelling standpoint, and then so much validity and merit from we need to get this out as a documentary, on Netflix or something. So that we want to, be the next whatever, like whatever it was, Forks Over Knives or Super Size Me or whatever. Like, those things, when you get a film out in front of someone, like, it starts a conversation, right? People are able
Mhm.
to, it's a couple hours of their time. Everybody talks about it, and then you get these conversations going and people asking questions, and that's how we make change.
Mhm.
And so as a storyteller, our story through film is really amazing. And so I do some filmmaking here where I live in Washington State, and one of my film friends, his name is Ethan Schatz, and the man bleeds documentary. Like, it is his heart and soul, and it is everything he wants to do in film. And so when Anais was like, someone should make a documentary, I'm like, so yeah, I got these people, I got these friends, they'd be super interested in looking at this. And I like to refer to myself as the librarian of life. So I'm like, what connection do I have that I can connect you with, and just like to pair people up. And so I, connected her
Mhm.
with Ethan, and Ethan was like, I don't know anything about
Mhm.
pharmacy. Let me think about it. And a month goes by, and Ethan really dug into the the Reddit subthreads. You know what I mean? He got down in
Yeah.
there quite a ways, and he was like, "Oh, okay." He started to see it, and he's like, "There seems to be some frustration here." And it was with some pharmacy technicians, and he really got a heart for the pharmacy techs,
Mhm.
because they are underpaid. They're not making a pharmacist wage, and they are taking the brunt of all the majority of the Karens in line, and all of those things. And they're really having to pull a lot of weight, and they're not getting the same benefits. And so his heart really went out to them, and wanting to tell that human story. So now we are a team of three, Shots with That
Mhm.
LLC, when we like put this together, and we've been working on it for 6 months, and we have interviewed over 50. We've just pre-interviews, via Zoom, 50 people: pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, patients, patient advocates,
Mhm. And
experts
we
in the
also have,
industry. Yeah, go ahead.
since we released our website and redid all of that, we have over 40 people who've reached out in the last week who are also interested in telling their story. So there are definitely a lot of people reaching out to us and wanting to just get it off their chest, because it's been just this burden on these staff, these people, for so long, and people just want to talk about it, but people are scared. And that's
Yeah.
the part where we want to come in,
Hmm.
is people are terrified of retaliation, because a lot of these bigger corporations, so you're like your CVS, your Walgreens, etc., um, are like, if you speak out, like, we'll find a way to fire you. And people are scared of that. And
Yeah.
because there's someone we talked to who is a comedian who got fired for doing comedy,
Hmm.
What?
like a stand-up. comedy set. Yeah, look up RX Comedy is his YouTube channel. There's a video about it up there. ZDoggMD did a video on it. But that's why people are scared. It's their livelihood.
Yeah.
And we get it. We're like, we don't want anyone. If you need your job and you need to just grind it out and like it sucks and you feel bad and like you are doing the best you can and you can't talk to us and you don't feel comfortable with doing that, that's totally fine, which is why our fundraising slogan is put your money where you can't put your mouth. Like, we will find people to tell that story.
That's a great slogan.
Thank you. That was Kim on a call.
It was. I think I was on like a half a gummy. It was pretty late. We were zooming, and I was like, "I got it. I know exactly what we're gonna do."
And speaking of all this, I just want to let everybody know: if you look in the description, the video description, all their links are there. The website is, if I'm not mistaken, wouldyoulikeShotsWithThat.com. So that's fairly easy. But the link tree, their Instagram, Facebook,
I think you're
all
the
this
first person who's called it easy. I'll have to say that.
Oh.
First person who's called our website an easy one to say.
And your graphic design, I mean, the entire fry container with the RX on it. I mean, what y'all have done from a visual standpoint to kind of get across your message is actually really, really well done. And
thanks. We had so much fun with that.
Because that was like us and Canva.
Yeah,
like,
Canva,
that was
man.
Us grinding it out.
Shout out
Canva.
to the Canva. Like, if you guys don't use that program, it is so fun. Like, it's so fun.
We use GIMP around here. It's
okay.
Yeah.
That's an old school one. Like, I do not know how to use it. I get super confused. Anyway, random
YouTube videos.
YouTube videos.
Going on what you said about, people being scared of retaliation and whatnot, one of the comments in the chat from Hero was, and this does say a lot, she said, I think it shows how bad the problem is that you actually have gotten people to go on record about it. And she's followed up with, I imagine most in pharmacy are used to defaulting towards discretion.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that's really important to us, and we've had several interviews where people are like, okay, I want to talk to you, but I have to remain anonymous. And we're like, yeah, that's fine. And so not only are we willing to use, the TikTok voice if we have to, or we'll get someone else to voice over your thing, or we'll put you in the shadow silhouette like you're, an ex-mafia member or something. Like, not only for your own safety and for your own comfort, but that also is very telling, right? Like, the only way that you feel safe enough to share what's going on as a pharmacist in the United States, like a pharmacist and a pharmacy technician in the United States, like, is to do that, then, I mean, we're all about it. We're all about making people feel safe. We're all about telling the truth, and, we speak truth to power. That's what we're here.
Well, speaking of pharmacy techs, our good friend the Ranty Bastard said pharmacy techs are cranked out by local colleges and given pie in the sky dreams only to be used and abused like a chew toy.
Yes.
Heartbreak.
Yep.
And somebody referenced the fact that the tech that you had in your trailer talking about practicing on an orange. And so kind of explain that process to everybody who may not be familiar, because I did not know this was going on, even though I work somewhere currently that does have a pharmacy there, and evidently, it's a common practice.
Yes, so it is a common practice. And so when you are getting
like tattoo artists,
trained sometimes, you like, at least when I got trained, we practiced on each other. And not an orange, but sometimes with COVID, because you couldn't have a lot of those in-person classes, when they're learning how to give a vaccine, they're like, okay, well, they give you a lot of background, like lecture type of stuff about how you give vaccines and different things to watch out for like problems. If you're a technician, like when to get your pharmacist involved. But basically, like, the skin on your deltoid kind of feels like an orange. So like right on here. And so they'll be like, okay, so when you're doing it on a person, this is how you landmark, you find the deltoid, and then you give your injection. And so rather than having people start right away on a person, they give them an orange, and they're just like, okay, hold the orange like you would a shoulder, and then inject into it. And then, okay, now you just practice on whoever your coworker is who happens to be in there. And give them a shot of saline. Okay, you've done I think it's 4 total usually for that class. So it's like 2 on the orange maybe, and then like 2 on a person.
And then you're good to go. You're like official.
And then you're good to go, and you can give shots. You can administer vaccines. And it's
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's amazing. All right, so the one thing I want you to cover is, and you discuss it on the website, why are you referring it to the fast-foodification of pharmacy?
Yes, I'll let Kim talk about it. It's so fun to talk about.
So, well, I mean, what part of it is the severity of the issue, right? Is it? I mean, it's intense, right? Like this is it's a the working conditions are so awful. Just like they are everywhere. It's a great resignation story, but the stakes are life and death, right? Like so it can get pretty heavy. Like we've heard some really traumatic stories from people that we've interviewed, and we know as storytellers that can be a lot. That can be a lot to ask of an audience to take on. So we are using our amazing device of comedy and satire to help, like, I'm going to use the word exaggerate, but that's not actually what it is. It's probably almost more like where you almost like anthropomorphize, like, some version of that to be like, okay, it's really hard to wrap our heads around an industry that we don't understand, but we get fast food, right? Like we understand that. So we're going to be using that metaphor as a way to like, oh, okay, like, and we have animation planned that we want to use, those like explainer sort of videos that you see in documentaries that help you like, okay, let me break it down for you. And then you like explain it. So we'll have those to help you understand. And using fast food is a really great metaphor, ironically, because a lot of fast food people make more than pharmacy technicians make. And so that's really frustrating and also part of the ridiculousness. So we're, sometimes the way to fight back against corruption and power and all of that is to use humor, to use satire, to you tell the truth and you twist it just a little bit, right? And people are able to metabolize that a little bit more. You have to bring a little bit of levity in, and the metaphor is just, it's accurate, it's clear. They all got drive-throughs. People want their stuff fast, so.
And that right there is why it's so accurate. Is people, it's not healthcare. It's an errand. It's like going through a McDonald's. Yep. And so when people pull up to the pharmacy, they just want to zip through like they zip through McDonald's. And because people have these shot quotas that are, it's not that we don't want to give people immunizations or vaccines. We want to give people shots. We absolutely do. But there's a certain number of people who are eligible for shots. And we would like to immunize that population. When you inject artificial goals and metrics that aren't feasible, then it feels like you have to stand up at the counter when you're counseling and be like, oh, would you like a shot with that? And so it feels like you're upselling fries.
Yeah.
And then, Anaïs, will you talk a little bit about the metrics that you see? Because I don't even think, I only know about them because you told me. So, like, what are some of the metrics?
I can talk about metrics.
Yeah.
So if
everybody in retail knows cross-selling, like we all got it.
Yeah. So with these metrics, if anybody has worked in like a fast food restaurant, which that is not the type of retail I had worked at before pharmacy, so I don't know it as well. But one person we talked to said they have like drive time metrics. How long is a person in your drive-through? Pharmacy has the same metric. How long is someone in your drive-through? There's also the expectation. There's like a counter. A lot of times in some of these computer systems, you'll see in the corner of your screen how long it's taking you to fill a prescription. You can like see those kind of numbers. And the expectation for a lot of these chains is 15 minutes to do everything that you need to do if someone is waiting in your store. If you have an issue with the doctor, to call the insurance, to get it filled, to counsel all of your patients, to do all of the safety checks for all of the prescriptions. So if people are waiting in your store, you have 15 minutes to do that. And that's the expectation. Same thing with answering the phone. Like there's phone metrics. You need to answer the phone within 3 rings. And so what we hear from some people is if you don't have a district manager who's great, they might say, oh, here's how you get around the phone metric. When their phone rings, don't answer it. Just pick it up, put it on hold, and park it, which that happens in the front store too. Like if you don't have enough help. And so like those are some of the types of metrics, volume goals. Like a lot of times the number of prescriptions you sell and the number of immunizations that you give, sometimes it's tied into the hours that you get in your store. So it's like you're not meeting these goals and you're not able to fill enough prescriptions. And so they cut your hours because you didn't hit your goal. Which you're like, how does that make any sense?
That's punitive.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, there's
punitive in healthcare, like because you're not doing the volume, like it doesn't, it's so baffling.
Well, and they're taking hours away based on these metrics, but we all know that pharmacies, regardless of metrics, aren't staffed well enough to begin with.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
So ideally, what would you say would be like the ideal staffing situation for one of these big box pharmacies? Like
that's tough, but yeah, it would depend a lot on your prescription volume, and it's so tough because like when basically here, I'll just break it down like station to station. So you have all these different stations, right? And someone is dropping off a prescription at the window, or they're coming in electronically. There have to be one or two people standing there to take in the prescriptions and answer the phones. So that should be like one or two people do intake, depending on the volume. Then you need people to fill it. Like, depending on what your volume is, you need enough people where there's like usually a queue counting how many prescriptions you have to fill. So you need enough people where your queue doesn't have like dozens or hundreds or over 1,000 prescriptions in it. Because if you may fill 500 in a day, but like the number in quote in fill may never go above like, I don't know. I've had stores back in the day where it would never go above like 20 or 30 because you had enough people to fill the prescriptions and make it like keep those numbers down. Mm-hmm. So then you have to have enough people there. You also need people. It's just like the retail front store. You have to put truck away. Mm-hmm. So your order comes in. Someone's got to put truck away. Your lead technician has to do the schedule. They got to train new techs. So you have to have enough labor to do all of those ancillary duties. You will still have to do pull expireds like you would in grocery at a store. You still have to go through your shelves. Someone has to do that. So you need a person to do all these ancillary duties, ideally.
Inventory.
Who's separate from the work floor.
Yep.
Inventory is a whole separate thing. Having pharmacist overlap would be the ideal situation where there's like 2 or 3 pharmacists instead of just one for 14 hours.
I was going to ask you that. So what is the concept behind that? Why, let's say you've got a store that's open 12 hours. All right. Why is there not like an opening pharmacist and a closing pharmacist?
That's okay. So the reason I'll just come out and say it, you can see it on my LinkedIn anyway. Like people can find out where I work. I went to Walmart as a pharmacist because they had pharmacist overlap in the store, like in the area where I was. There was an opening pharmacist and a closing one. And I was like, that's amazing. And they had like a bathroom and they had a lunch break early on. I have no idea why that's the standard to not just have 2 pharmacists, like where that came from.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's just put this out there. If Walmart's doing that, I mean,
they're like
the worst.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're one of the best retail pharmacists to
for
work
the pharmacy
for.
part,
For the pharmacy
right?
Part, yeah, not the front store. But as a pharmacist or a pharmacy technician for a retail pharmacist to work for, like Walmart.
Walmart's where it's at, honestly, and it's just like Walmart and Costco are kind of where you want to be.
See, that's just mind blowing to me because I mean we know what
Walmart's. When I heard it, I was like, wait a minute.
Walmart's overall perception in the industry isn't all that great. So, but if Walmart is the one kind of doing that for pharmacies, other pharmacy companies should be embarrassed. Because I never understood that because, like, for instance, in a typical store setting, you got a store manager, you usually have an assistant manager, you might have like a key carrier, and unless somebody called out sick and you were just hung there and had to work, there was always an opening, maybe a mid and a close. There was none of this working, 6 days a week, 14 hours straight, with no break. Yeah. And and the only thing I can think of is it comes down to some sort of money saving measure.
Oh yeah, so it's reimbursement. They don't want to pay 2 pharmacists. They're like, well, we don't want to pay 2 pharmacists when we can just get by with 1. And so I know for some stores, like some companies, I've heard the number to get a second pharmacist is 600, is like 500 or 600 prescriptions a day before they'll give you a second person. And
why even base it on that? Just do the right thing. I mean, pharmacists are human too.
Exactly. Why do it?
Right.
So it has to be reimbursement, because like insurance reimbursement and like insurances contract with a thing called a pharmacy benefit manager, who like manages the pharmacy part of your medical insurance. And so the reimbursements from these companies is becoming like, people talk about this in the industry a lot, is like that reimbursement determines how much money you get from filling prescriptions. Because let me tell you something that shocked Kim. I was talking about negative reimbursement, and she goes, a what now? A negative reimbursement? So a lot of the prescriptions you fill behind the counter, you lose money on.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not making any money, because you like, what you're making money on is a lot of times the stuff that's over the counter, like those products out there. But if you're losing money filling prescriptions, they want to cut as much as they can back there, and it's usually in the form of labor costs.
Well, of course. Now, speaking of OTC, now
Yes.
in your chain pharmacies, does the pharmacy get credit for like OTC medication that's on the sales floor being sold?
Depends. So some chains, like at Walmart, the pharmacy manager would get credit for that. But there was like a kind of, it would overlap a little bit, because there was a department manager for the OTC section. Sometimes they were under pharmacy, sometimes they weren't. But you would get credit for, some companies give you credit for those OTC sales.
Wow, somebody in the comments, Mad Dog said, I had to go to CVS tonight, one pharmacist and one tech running drive-through.
Oh,
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so common. It's usually like one person, one and one. A lot of pharmacists, especially at those like lower volume stores, when it's like, I'm saying lower volume, it's like still 200 prescriptions. It's a lot when you're by yourself.
Oh my
It will
goodness.
just be like on weekends, it'll just be a pharmacist. You don't even get a technician, and you have to do all of the same duties: answer the phone, get the window, get drive, check prescriptions, check your own work.
Yeah, I was
because
just
you're the
gonna,
one who
I was
typed
just
and
gonna
filled
have
it.
you elaborate on that, because there's a, like the pharmacist tech, like the way they check, the way you check one another, right? Someone will fill it,
So how
someone
it
will
should
count
be.
it, visually
Mhm.
check it. Like there's all these steps to make sure that what goes out, like goes into the right bottle and all that stuff.
Yeah, so what should happen is the prescription comes from your doctor, and a technician should be the one putting that into the computer system, because everyone thinks, oh, it just talks automatically, and it's like, that's not true. The technician has to type it into the system.
Read your doctor's
still.
handwriting,
Even
and
for electronic
put it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, scan it in if it's a paper prescription. So the tech makes sure it's transcribed correctly. Then the pharmacist gets it, and they're like, first you have to be like, does this make clinical sense to me? Like, is this dose going to kill you? Are there drug interactions? So that's the first thing I would look at as a pharmacist, even before I looked, was it typed correctly? When I look at the doctor's, because I would look at the doctor's prescription first before I even went and looked at what the tech typed in, and go, okay, is that dose reasonable? Is this drug reasonable? So I'd look at that. Then I'd be like, okay, did the technician transcribe it correctly from what the doctor wrote on their prescription? And then ideally, technician to fill it, or if you have a robot, like a counting robot, those, you still have techs, but like you may have some technology to help you. That one of those things counts the pills, either a technician, robot, some combination of both. Then it goes back to the pharmacist, who's like, okay, do these pills in this bottle, when you're looking at it, are they right? And that's your like final check, like, okay, for the last time, I'm going to check and make sure everything is correct before I send it out and give it to the patient or the customer standing at the counter. And then, I mean, the technician would sell it, make sure it's sold to the right person, because that's another place where there could be an error. If you get everything right before and you sell it to the wrong person, then
grab the wrong,
there you go. That's the
Gonzalez or
problem.
Smith or whatever off the counter,
out of the bin. And then the pharmacist goes over, and if it's a new prescription, or in some states you do counsel on both new and refill prescriptions, you talk to the patient and you're like, this is the medication you're getting. But if all of those steps are performed by the exact same person, one, you're going to be fatigued and make more mistakes. Two, you need multiple sets of eyes on it.
Like it just doesn't make any sense.
It right?
It doesn't make any sense at all, right? Like,
now, to your point about basically looking at it and making sure it makes clinical sense. I think this is a good segue into something that you had mentioned in our messaging, because
Yes.
you're a doctor.
Yes.
So you're
Yes.
making an informed, educated decision. You're not just
Yes.
being like, oh, I'm not going to give this to you, right?
Yes, exactly. So that just like Twitter, we were like the main character. Pharmacy was like the main character of Twitter, it felt like yesterday or the day before, whatever day that was. Because if we just got into this huge, our pharmacists just like getting into this huge argument with the general public about what a pharmacist's role is and like whether you can, pharmacists are allowed and have the scope of practice to refuse prescriptions. And I know it's really complicated in today's like political landscape, really. However, it shouldn't go so far the other way where it's like pharmacists can't even say no to anything. Because there was a pharmacist who tweeted, like, if I had filled every single thing in the last 20 years of me being a pharmacist, I would be in jail or like sued into oblivion or something, because
right?
people would be dead.
Yeah.
Like, and people were jumping on that. People were like, pharmacists have no right to refuse anything. And then some people were like piling on, like, we didn't mean like clinical stuff, but we mean all this other stuff. But it's like, that's a slippery slope argument to be like, pharmacists can't deny.
This is a really silly analogy, but it's what I'm best at. Like, it's like like a bartender. At some point, they have to make a call, right? Like, no, I'm refusing you service. Like, you've had enough. Like, no, like, right? Like,
yeah,
and it's on them to be safe about it, right? There are these other things where you go, no, it's not. This ain't it. Like,
and that's not. Yeah, and some of the things, it's like people think we're refusing when it's like we're not even really refusing. Like, people get unfortunately, and this is a thing that people were getting flack for on Twitter, was people think we're refusing when we're not. And people are like, no one actually would think that if you say you're out of stock that you're refusing. The amount of times that we would say we're out of stock and someone would turn around to the person they're with in line and go, they're not going to fill this for me. They're refusing to fill this for me, was so many. Or, oh, I have to call your insurance. Oh, I have to order this. Oh, there's a question I have from your doctor, and I just going to get clarification before I fill it. All of those have been told to me, oh, you're refusing to fill it. Like, I've gotten complaints about all kinds of things, but even just basic stuff like, oh, she didn't want to fill it for X, Y, or Z reason. Most people are lovely. So I'll put that right out there. Most people are lovely once you explain it. Like, hey, I can't fill this because there's a drug interaction and your doctor says that it's fine, but I cannot in good faith give this to you. And I've had that happen where it's like, it is really risky. And I'm like, hey, take this back to your doctor and have a conversation with it. I tried to have a conversation with them, and this is why this is dangerous. This is why this could kill your child. And I'm not going to fill something that's going to kill your child. And the parents were happy. And they were like, yeah, we're going to go back to the doctor and find an alternative. And they did. And everything was okay. But, yeah, no, that's a whole thing that people don't understand what pharmacists do. So they think like we have no authority to refuse anything.
Right. And it's that whole customer's always right garbage.
mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, yes. Which is bad in any sector.
Yes.
Right? Not accurate.
Like,
not accurate.
There was a question that came through. Mad Dog wanted to know, do pharmacists have to carry some type of malpractice insurance to cover themselves for mistakes?
We do not have to, but we should. So I do carry my own malpractice insurance, but because the corporation does carry insurance most corporations carry insurance on their pharmacists, but when it comes down to it, who are they going to side with?
Oh, exactly.
So it is very wise to carry your own malpractice insurance.
So, looking at all this now, guys, I asked them before we started streaming the amount of vaccines that pharmacists actually are able to give, which evidently is like all of them. So,
basically.
And then you add, the COVID vaccinations, which I think, pharmacists were already kind of buried to begin with, and that was just like a big waterfall. What about the testing? How much of a nightmare has that been?
That has been really, it takes up so much bandwidth. So I never had to test. I didn't come from a store that was testing at the time, but what ends up happening is you tie up so much of your resources, because if you're doing testing through your drive-through, you have closed a lane in your drive-through, and that person is sitting there swabbing they have to swab their own nose, and some people don't listen, and so they'll swab their nose and then put it in their mouth. That happens a lot, apparently.
Yeah.
But like, people do it, and so then you have to start over, and then you have to wait for the test results. So you're tying up a whole lane. Either that, or you're tying up your immunization room inside of the store. So if sometimes people test in the store, and if you have like either like a curtain for your immunizations, or if you have a separate room, that room's tied up until people finish the test. Also, an entire technician is removed from that workflow to process those tests. And so if you're taking someone out of workflow for 15 minutes and you only have one other person, then the pharmacist is doing everything else.
Right. And so it really seems to me, too, on the surface, there was an immense workload put on everybody, but they weren't offering you any more help to get it done.
Absolutely.
So basically, but they did it. So they did it first. And so what happened was, at first, when all of this was rolling out, all of these companies were like, oh, we're going to hire all of these techs. We're going to hire all these pharmacists. Like, when I was still at Walmart, they had vaccine clinics. And so I worked some of those, and they were like specific to take the workload off of the store itself, like off of the pharmacy. It was just a different part of the store. And they would do these big vaccine clinics. They had all these hours for everybody. They would bring in extra staff. Everyone was like really supportive of each other. Same thing with the testing. They hired all these people, and then it was just like all of that dried up, and they were like, oh, we hired all these people. We don't have hours for you.
Wow.
And so now everyone is like, whoa, now I'm part-time. What's happening? You cut all my hours. I don't have enough hours now.
Right.
And so it was very sudden.
There was a comment that was just made that if anything puts more pressure on pharmacists, Mad Dog said that doctors are making it very hard to get vaccines in office now. They just want to write the script for you to go to the pharmacy and get it.
Yes, absolutely. It's very true, because they don't, like, a lot of times these clinics, they're burdened too. So I won't say that doctors' offices aren't burdened, because it's the same issues. Like, having enough staff to give all these vaccines is hard, but they just everyone thinks, oh, pharmacy is the most accessible health. If they think of us as healthcare providers, we're the most accessible one. Half the time they don't think of us as healthcare providers, but they're like, oh, just go to the pharmacy. You can just walk in, no appointment.
Right. It's a different expectation from the patient's perspective. Like, when you go to the doctor's office, you expect to wait. Like, you hate it, but you expect it, right? So there's just a different, even a walk-in clinic, like, you're going to wait a long time when you go to urgent care or whatever. Like, it's just part of it. So I just think the expectations there are so different. And then, and that's the fast-foodification aspect of this
I was about to say
that.
That
You're going to just walk in, you're going to drive through, just give me the thing. And you're like, hang on, like, to give anybody a minute to do anything, because again, they're looking at it as an errand. I want to run in and I want to grab the thing I need, and I want to go to self-checkout, and I don't want anyone to interrupt me, right? So they're just not viewing it at all in reality.
Oh yeah, and speaking of which, is like people who go to the pharmacy on their lunch break with that mindset, not realizing it may take longer than your lunch break to get this done, and then they get mad.
Right,
they get mad. Oh, all day. I'm here on my lunch break. I'm just like,
do you go to the doctor's office on your lunch break? Because
you wouldn't go do it on your lunch break. You would come later, and it's like, I get it, because these pharmacies are closed, because they don't have enough staff, so people who don't even have the opportunity to come after work anymore, because the store is closed. There's where I live, there's a store that's just like, we got a message that was like, this store is closed indefinitely. We don't know when this pharmacy will open back up if you need anything from them. And I was just like, yeah, there's no one to staff it. But if you're that person and you work a job if you work 9 to 5 and your pharmacy starts closing at 4 and opens at 9, you're like, what am I supposed to do? And they're closed weekends.
Wow.
Now,
there was a comment in the chat from Pam Brown Garrett. Said, try and call your doctor and speak to them. It's not going to happen. You can call a pharmacist and we will answer your call, period.
Yes. exactly. It's true. And a real try.
Yeah.
So if there's staff,
you'll notice in the trailer
phone,
the phone rings a lot. That is definitely intentional.
Yes. And so with doctor's office, that's the thing I want to point out to people who aren't familiar. Everyone thinks we have a special pharmacist line to call the doctor, but we don't. So we dial the same phone number that you do, wait in the same queue, get to someone at the reception desk, and we're like, oh, we need to talk to a doctor about this issue. And sometimes we get passed back to a nurse, but usually it's a voicemail box for a nurse who'll call us back when they get to it. So no, we get you.
Yeah, and then they get mad at you when they should be getting mad at the physician who's not getting back to you to get them handled.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then they should be, we have a lot of places where they physically, like, there's physically not enough people to answer the phone. And so pharmacies are lit. I've heard stories of some pharmacies unplugging their phones. They'll just turn them off because they're like, we know we can't answer it, which is so dangerous because, like, what if it's a doctor calling back about the prescription clarification, or it's another pharmacy who needs a transfer, or there's a lot of other issues where you need to talk to that pharmacy staff and it becomes a safety issue.
That's the thing. That's the thing right there.
Because you can't get through. So I'll give you a little perspective on the hospital side of things. When you come into a hospital, you don't necessarily know people's medications, like what they're on, right? And so even if you're in the same hospital system, people have doctors outside of that system, or they're coming, their doctor's not attached to the hospital system. So if they get admitted, you need to know what drugs they're on. And a lot of times you can just talk to the person, and if they're able to answer your questions and you're confident what they're taking, you're just like, cool, I can take your word for it. Sometimes people, because of whatever they're coming in for, are not in a position to talk to you in that moment because of whatever emergency they're having. And so you need to call their pharmacy to figure out which drugs they're on. If you can't call to get their drugs, you might miss something like, what if someone's on insulin, or what if someone's on a seizure medication, or what if someone's on something like a serious medication that you need to know about when they're admitted to the hospital, and the only way to get that info is calling their pharmacy, and you can't get through to them. And so that actually happens quite a bit to the staff at our hospital, where you just
But
can't get
that's
through.
a symptom of a really big problem.
Absolutely.
And,
with a really simple solution, just need more people to work. But give the people the hours,
Exactly. Like, and that's the thing. I mean, we struggle in retail with that all the time. It's all, my whole motto when I started the podcast was employees are more than a controllable expense.
Yeah.
There is a huge difference in something like what pharmacists do, because it's a public health service. I mean, really and truly. All right. Selling Twinkies and Cokes is not a public health service. So if you're
the stakes are just a little bit higher.
Right.
I mean, I get pretty hangry.
Yeah.
So,
so
it could be life and death, but probably not.
You got to prioritize, what's important, and you've got to staff appropriately. And I think, the biggest thing is you're still dealing with wealth before health, profit over people. And, look, the Great Resignation has been a thing. Boy, CVS, Walgreens, all of them, they're going to be really, really mad when all of a sudden the pharmacists say, that's it, we're done.
Yeah.
Because
I loved your tweet the other day when you were like, what would a general pharmacist strike look
it'd be
like?
damn beautiful to see.
And I was like,
and
we would catch it on film. Let us know. We'll be there.
and so having said that, I mean, when you look at that, and I get the feeling too, when you're talking about negative reimbursements, it's like this like really corrupt pyramid scheme of the insurance companies and the chain pharmacies playing together and using you guys as like the punching bags.
Yeah, that is how it feels a lot of the time.
And like I said, my time at CVS, and like I told you, this is like 1996. It was bad then, but it ain't nowhere near as bad as it just shows there's not really been any progress except for Walmart. And somebody Irish said in the chat that saying Walmart is the best option is kind of like saying they're the best tumor.
Right.
Not as what is it? Not as malignant, maybe. Not as
right? It's benign. It's fine.
Benign. There you go.
But what's really happening is like there's a lot of a lot of the independent pharmacies actually are like those mom and pop like drugstores are really good. Like not all, like it's like any business, not all are good, but like a lot of them are, but they can't keep their doors open because the reimbursement it favors the chain. So when the PBMs and insurance companies drop their contracts, they a lot of times favor the chains.
Yeah, because that's where the money's at.
So for the money, it's where the money's at. And so like these smaller stores who do staff appropriately and do give you that care and that customer service and that healthcare that you're looking for they physically can't keep the lights on.
Yeah, it's the same with like mom and pop businesses. I mean, they cannot compete compete with corporate entities that come in. They've got bigger buying power, you know, and they just push legitimately good local businesses out of business.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know. So talk a little bit about what you've got going on with your crowdfunding.
Oh yeah. So go for it.
Yeah, so we currently have our page up on GoFundMe, and we have set our current budget. We're going for $22,000, which is we've got a trip planned at the end of August. We're going to go to a pharmacy conference in Oklahoma City, and we've got several people that are going to be in the documentary that we're interviewing. We want to see them in person, and so we're kind of trying to do the probably like 5 birds with a stone, something like that.
One stone.
And so we've kind of set the budget for we've got plane tickets and rental car and the hotel, and then the gear rental and all the production costs to actually shoot while we're there. So we're really excited about that, and we are definitely looking at how we can stretch every dollar as much as we can. But yes, we've got that, and so that's currently what we're crowdfunding for right now. It's been up for like a week, and we made, last I saw, was over $13,000.
Yeah, and your initial goal is only 22, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 22 right now. We're kind of just doing it in phases.
We're doing like trip by trip, basically, at this point.
Yeah, so we've got 2 more trips, probably 3 more trips after that planned for this year. We're from the Pacific Northwest, so we're gonna do some road tripping and go check out some of the places we can around here and meet the people from around here that in person. And then we want to go to, in upstate New York, there's this really awesome pharmacy model called Wellness RX, and they currently have a for-profit independent pharmacy, and they're opening a nonprofit, a community-driven nonprofit pharmacy in, I'm gonna get the wrong word. What's the city? Is it Florence?
Oh, I don't remember the city. It's somewhere in upstate New York.
Sorry.
I have to look.
I know, but it's awesome. And we met with them, and it was like, you can imagine, right? Just like anything, right? When you hear all the stories over and over, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like weary. Like, it's really wears on you. And I was like, I don't, like, we didn't really have an ending for the documentary. We're kind of like, okay, it sucks. Yeah, it's pretty much the basic. We get to the all is lost moment. We're in the end of Act 2, and it's like, whew, this is rough. And then we met with Wellness RX, and it was such an uplifting conversation. Like, they are really taking it in hand and really looking to be an alternative model for pharmacy. So, because what happens is you'll have these smaller towns and cities where the volume that they're going to do is not going to be viable for a chain store to be there, right? So you'll have CVS and Walgreens, et cetera, pulling out of these cities, and then they end up with a pharmacy desert, where basically there isn't you got to drive an hour in any direction to go get to a pharmacy. And so Wellness RX is looking for ways to do a nonprofit model so a community could open its own. I'm from credit unions, right, originally, and so like kind of the way a credit union is, you have your people, they start their own kind of their own kind of pharmacy, and the level of care and that they're able to give really focus on mental health. Like, it's beautiful. Like, we're so excited to go. They're going to have a grand opening in the fall, and we get to go be there, and we're going to film it and everything, of course, and talk to them. And so we have that trip, and then there's an art show in Florida that we really want to go to. there's a pharmacist, an artist, and his husband is a pharmacist, and just the toll that it has taken on the mental health and everything there. And the artist put it into this amazing piece of art, and he's got a show in Florida, and really wants to get a bunch of healthcare workers to come to the show. And so again, we would love to be there and be able to get the dialogue of everyone talking about it, and just raising the dialogue, and so we can educate that
some
main
hopeful,
audience.
like, messages, because that's one piece. We were on a call earlier today, and one thing that people mentioned, just as some feedback, they were like, you got to have some hope. And we're like, it's coming. It's just not in the the trailer was to get that emotional core so that people will give us money. But we're like, yes.
Because it's true. It's totally true and accurate.
True. And we're just like, if we didn't, like, we want pharmacy to still be a viable profession. Like, if I didn't care about the profession, I would not be doing a documentary about it. Like, I would not be putting myself out there here like this if I didn't love the profession of pharmacy. Like, it can be a good profession. It is a good profession for a lot of people, but it's just like, it's gotten so dire that people don't feel like it's a good option, and people are pulling out of pharmacy school and they don't want to do it. But it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be a really good profession if we can kind of get back to our roots and have it just be like patient centric, enough staff. It can be a really good gig, and we just want to like help tell the story to get us back there.
Well, that's like, talking about staffing. I just remember this. I went into Walgreens probably, I'm going to say 6 months or so ago. And we went in, and you had like one pharmacist and 2 techs. And one of the techs was having to go up front and run a cash register to cover the retail side of the store.
Oh, no. Oh.
Yeah.
That's so rough.
Also, too, talking about GoodRx, what do you think about, are you familiar with Mark Cuban and his cost plus drugs thing he's doing?
Yeah.
Do you see that being something that maybe him and his organization would do a typical kind of pharmacy like that as well?
So, Mark Cuban, if you are listening to this podcast at all, we would love to talk to you. Please talk to us.
He's on our list.
Talk to Mark Cuban, because that is one type of alternative pharmacy model we would be interested to see, because there's already a lot of different types of online pharmacies out there, and so a lot of people have tried this route, kind of like what Mark Cuban's doing, but he's trying to revolutionize it and make it different. So we'd love to hear his perspective, because mail order and online pharmacies should be an option, not the only one. And that's where the issue comes in, because we have a patient we've talked to whose son's prescriptions were delivered and the truck was like 140 degrees.
Ooh.
And so the medication is supposed to be refrigerated, and her son went into organ failure.
Oh, God.
Because of it, because of how it was stored. And so she is a really strong advocate about that stuff needs to be regulated better, so that that doesn't happen to anyone else.
So what we're seeing is, right, when you have the vertical integration of like CVS, where they're the pharmacy, they're the PBM, they're the insurance company, they're the whatever, like they have, you use them, you got to go all the way up. And so they'll say you have to use mail order pharmacy, which they're not actually supposed to be able to tell you that you have to use.
They're not technically saying you have to. They're saying
but you have to get an exception
a month to get your medication if you want to go to a different pharmacy.
Yeah, right? You could just not use your insurance.
Pay for it.
Yeah. And so that's just, so there's some things like that it's like, well, if mail order pharmacy is, if you have to basically, to say that I'd have to pay $700 for something is basically you're telling me that I have to do it the other way, because me and everybody else in middle class, we don't have that.
No,
like, that's
we
not
don't.
Happening.
No,
right?
No,
we don't have that.
Just laying around.
Who has that? And then, but then if you're telling me, so, okay, in order to use my insurance, I have to go through this mail order pharmacy, but the mail order pharmacy, the way that it's delivered to me is in an unsafe way, like how, like none of that makes sense. So that's, it's, and again, we have not had the opportunity to talk to Mark Cuban. He is on our list. We may have an in, and we'll be reaching out. We'll be reaching out later. That's one of our follow-up tasks. And because I want to know, like, cool, you do this thing, but then how is it shipped? Like, how are you ensuring the medication?
Also, what does your pharmacist consultation look like? Because for some people, if you are just on the same thing. You don't have any question. Your dose is pretty stable. You kind of understand how things work. You're savvy enough to use technology. You can understand a phone consultation. You can get through, because sometimes with mail order and those online pharmacies, it's hard to get through their phone tree. It's hard. And so if you're a patient, you might give up before you get a pharmacist consultation and ask your question, because there's some times, like, we have a story that we'll share in the documentary, but like there was a patient who, her son had a question, and they drove in an hour to go to a pharmacy to talk to a pharmacist for 20 minutes to reassure this kid that he was going to be okay. And they were like, you would not get that at a mail order pharmacy.
No, you wouldn't.
There's no way.
Yeah, and it's just really seeing it as, right, like what the profession is, right? The people, it's healthcare, right? They're caring about people. Like, that's been amazing too, with all the pharmacists and pharmacy technicians that we've interviewed. Like, they're some of the most caring people who go into this job because, they love people, they love medicine, they want to, they like the orderliness of the job, or at least the way it was supposed to be, I guess. And it's a great fit for them, and they really, really care, and they just want to be able to serve people well. And it's really easy to take advantage of people like that, people who won't advocate for themselves because, they're just like there to do the job. And so anyway, it just really getting them the profession that they deserve and the healthcare that we deserve to, so they can, because a robot is not going to counsel me, right? If I'm like,
they're not
having to figure out what's going on with this, birth control or whatever, like, I need a person, right? I need a person to talk to about that.
And that's another thing. The entire industry is kind of spirit breaking, because I would think most people who get into pharmacy medicine, they're doing it from the aspect of they have a desire to help people. Then they get locked into these retailers, and it breaks their spirit, because honestly, I mean, let's call it for what it is. The retailers do not care if they're helping the people or not. No matter what facade they put up, all they're concerned about is shareholders being happy, profits being there, and you're killing the desire of these highly trained people to take care of other human beings. And that should not be allowed to go on without there being some sort of accountability for that.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes, because that is so true. Like, there's so many people who are just like, it's affecting not only their work life, it's also affecting their home life. They go home and they're so burnt out. They're just they feel like they're terrible to their families. Just like they feel like they have such a short fuse at home with their families, but that also translates into just the people that they deal with behind the counter, because if you're constantly berated, you're going to break eventually, and you're just not even going to care. Like, you're not going to care about your counsel. You're not going to care about how you talk to someone, and you're going to burn out, and you're going to not be able to just talk to someone in the way that you should, because like you said, your spirit is just broken.
The dangerous thing about that is, I mean, sure, you could be a store manager for CVS and you could be a pharmacist for CVS. You're working in the same building. You're both going through your own set of stresses. But a store manager is not going to have to go home one night completely broken because they were so burnt out, they were sick, they were tired, and did feel something wrong, and did cause somebody to wind up in a hospital, or did cause somebody unfortunately to lose their life from just a mistake.
Absolutely.
That is a next level area of guilt that store managers don't have.
So many pharmacists who go home and are like, I hope I didn't kill anyone today. And they think that, and that weighs on a lot of people's hearts, because they're just like, I don't know if
I mean, and to be set up to fail, right? Like, in a lot of ways. Like, it's just so, I mean, right, for profit. It's really disheartening. And I think honestly, that's, when power feels so big, right? And it feels like, you know, like the whole banking crisis of 2000, like they're too big to fail, like they're just all these things, like you just feel like you can never do anything to, you know. And so what we're hoping is that through the power of storytelling that we can educate enough people, so that everybody can, right, like there are more of us than there are of them.
Yes.
Like that's probably a little naive and idealistic, but that's
I don't know.
just
Tell us
somebody's got to
more
do
about
it.
Silent Spring.
You know what I mean? We got to like
Right.
lead the charge.
Yeah,
you know.
Kim, talk about Silent Spring, because that one, it's kind of.
Yeah. Okay, so there is a book. Hold on, I gotta make sure. I wanna make sure I give all of the credit here. Give me 1 second. There's a book called Silent Spring, and is by Rachel Carson, and basically she wrote the book, basically all about DDT, right? Back in, I think it came out in it says originally published in 1962. Okay, so this is when like everyone was just pouring DDT on everything, you know what I mean? And nobody knew, and it was not a big deal, and blah blah blah. And so basically, she is, you know, an academic and a scientist, and had all this data, but no one wants to hear about PBM reform. You know what I mean? No one wants to hear about the scientific data, and so they couldn't. You know, nobody cared. Nobody was listening, and so she rather than, you know, beating the drum that she had been, she wrote it as this book, and she started it with she opens it with a letter, and it's basically like, imagine if spring is silent. I mean, that's silent spring, because all of the bugs are dead, all of the birds are dead, like you're literally killing everything. So the reason why you want to have a green lawn, and the reason why you want to have all these things, like, but if it's silent though, like, and so she put it in this device that made it accessible, where like your regular everyday consumer audience person was like, oh, like they started to see it a little. She put it in a story, and because of that book, it went on to create, you know, lobbyists and everything to create the Environmental Protection Agency, which is currently under fire right now. So, you know, who knows? Roe versus Wade,
right?
EPA, like who knows what's up for grabs? But that book is really the thing that did it, because she was able to take the truth and put it in a way that people could metabolize it, something that made sense to them. And that's exactly, you know, what we're hoping to do. It's, you know, her model is an inspiration for us, to make big change. We want everyday regular people. If you use a pharmacy, this film is for you, right?
If you know someone who uses a pharmacy, this film is for you.
Right? If you think maybe someday you might use a pharmacy, this film is for you.
Well, and if you think that maybe one day you will be a pharmacist, this film may be for you too.
Yeah. We are pulling for you. We are, absolutely.
So, ladies, this has been amazing. I am kind of passionate about the whole treatment of pharmacist thing. I really am.
Thank you.
You know, it goes back to, you know, mid-90s horror stories and seeing how people got treated. And, you know, you're always hopeful that things get better, but by God, it hadn't. It you know, there was no progress from 96. It seems like it's went backwards and got worse. But what you two are doing is great. I think you know, like I told you, the graphics that you use, everything you're using to convey your message, you know, like you said, it makes it more digestible for people that may not know what goes on in the business. And I am hopeful that, you know, when this thing finally sees release, that, you know, your general customer will see this and maybe, just maybe, let's be realistic here. Maybe 30% of them, you know, improve their behavior. That's still progress.
It's absolutely progress.
Maybe hold in the tweet instead of tweeting that, like maybe
hold it back. Right.
I mean, you know, you never know what, and this is a sad part, you know, for what we all do and what pharmacists do is, you know, the general customer doesn't know what kind of day that person's having. They don't know what's going on in their life. You know, like in the trailer, you know, you have the pharmacist who had a miscarriage and went to work the next day. You know, and that pharmacist is going to have to stand there and take some garbage off of a Karen who's mad because she can't get, you know, her C2s, even though she shouldn't be having them. You know,
I love that you know what C2s are. I have now learned.
And it's true. Like I remember being, I don't know, I was like 7 months pregnant or something at the time. And I remember there was a customer who was upset. So, and the store manager came back to us and was like, oh, hey, can you talk to this person? And I was like, absolutely. And then they kind of explained a little bit of what the issue was. I looked into it and I was like, oh, this is, I think I can explain it to them. Their insurance wouldn't cover it. It was literally like insurance wouldn't cover it. It needed a prior authorization, more info from the doctor. And so I was like, I can explain that to them. Yeah. And this person full on yells, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't have mattered that I was pregnant or not, but I was. And full on screams at me, tells me, like, he's like, you just want me to go die then? And I was like, no. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I said. We'll still call your doctor. Have a good day.
I'm going to go die now.
Yeah. And
right? We have this, I've really, honestly, Anaïs, I think we should put the poll up somewhere where it's like all the things that people say, you know, like, yeah, I'm going to go die now. Like, there's all this list that pharmacists and pharmacy techs have all heard.
Oh, right? That would be good. I would love to see a compilation of that.
That would be so good.
Right?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, we're doing it.
Or I can honestly bet people have heard, well, my father is a physician, or my cousin's a pharmacist. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Oh,
yeah, but guess what? You're not. So.
You're not. So.
You know.
Yeah. Get out of my line.
I will say this, and Ranty had posted it earlier, and I posted this on Twitter way back when I started all this stuff, was the term retail and the term pharmacy should not ever be together.
Right? They shouldn't meet.
No.
Yeah.
You know, that's where it all went wrong. You know, there should be no such thing as a retail pharmacy.
The commodification of healthcare is a great evil.
Yep.
Yeah, like, it's really, really sad.
So, ladies, we're sitting at an hour 6. I don't want to hold you up any further. I want to tell you that anytime you want to come back, you just let me know.
Oh, we would love to come back.
Anytime.
Definitely.
I just have to say, your audience is fantastic. I have loved the fact that they're watching live and they're commenting and their questions and their comments are amazing. I just love it. I love it.
This is nonprofit for the people is what this is. Woo! So, you two have a wonderful rest of your evening. I will keep retweeting your stuff as you put it out. You know, keep me posted on how it's going. And if you got something that breaks that you want to talk about, hey, let me know. My DMs are always open.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve, so much.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful night.
You too.
Bye. Yeah, take care.